So I'm curious, we already alluded to this, so we already touched on this, but how was your relationship with your father? How do you feel there's any, and do you feel there's any developmental pain that led consciously or unconsciously to you becoming as big and strong as you did? Now you've already addressed that, so the next question is, have you observed this connection with bodybuilders, strength and combative athletes, and sports athletes in general?
Absolutely. I think goes without saying that every one of us has something there, right? I really believe in bodybuilding. I've noticed some people pursue bodybuilding because they need it, and some people pursue bodybuilding because bodybuilding chooses them. Like there's some people who just pick up a weight and they grow, and it's very easy to pursue things that you're very good at.
Yeah.
So there's some guys, I think, no question, are so genetically blessed that they pursue that.
Yeah.
But then there's everyone else who, probably 90% of the people who have some deep emotional need, or they're trying to fulfill something in life or fill a gap. And from all the guys that I deal with on the high circuits and the pros, certainly it's either mom, it's dad, it's picked on, like you said. I think that was very, very common as well. And all of those things, right? Some combination therein. But yeah, there's no doubt for me that gave me the confidence, because there was points where I was like, I wanted to fight back when I was being abused, and I same idea, attacking my mom kind of stuff, and I'm like, I need to be able to defend this. I remember the day when I was no longer scared. I remember the day when I was like, okay, if you get angry right now, I'm going to take you out. And I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And thank goodness never had to do it. But I think it's hard to speak for everybody, but many athletes definitely deal with that.
Yeah, I remember my father never once said good job. No matter how hard I worked, I could not get approval. The first time my father ever told me I'd done a good job came as quite a shock to me. I was 19, I was racing stock cars, and I was very successful. I set 3 track records my rookie year, and we had the biggest race of the year, which is called the Island Invitational, where it's a 50-mile race, if I remember right, 50-mile, 50 lap, I can't remember it's the longest race of the year, but there's no class division. The cheaper, less expensive cars, which is what I was driving, are racing against the fast, expensive cars, and it's whoever can get there the fastest, right? So I managed to get second place in this race, which with a cheesy, $30,000 car, and guys are in there with cars 3 times that expensive, and it pretty much blew everybody's mind. And I'm in the pits, and my crew is just ecstatic, and the newspapers are taking pictures, and all of a sudden my father walks up and he goes, shh. I think he shook my hand. He goes, "That was impressive. Where the hell did you learn to drive like that?" And I was in such shock, because it was the first time in my life he had acknowledged that I did something well. And I just started laughing. I said, "Well, you didn't get home from work till 5:30 at night usually, and that car that you used to think I drove in the fields, I was driving around the logging roads being Starsky and Hutch all day long." But you see, it really drove that need for acknowledgement, right?
And speaking along those lines, like, I never heard "I love you" from my dad. I never got a hug until I was 21 years old.
Yes.
So there's a lot of deep.
Well, I never heard "I love you."
I remember it because, the day that he said "I love you" was the day, because he thought I was dead. So I disappeared for a few weeks.
Wow.
I just never called anybody. I just took off. I think I was about 21, maybe a little younger, maybe 19. And just never called anybody. I was like, well, nobody gives a shit anyways. I'm just going to go do whatever I want to do and go about my business. And they called the police. They thought I was dead. And when I got home, they're like, for the first time I got a hug and I got "I love you."
Wow.
So yeah, that was maybe the first time when I realized that it was such an impact on me. Because, as a young boy, you kind of don't pay attention to it. I didn't even think, I wasn't conscious enough to think that there was an issue with my dad. It's just, that's how my dad is, right?
Yeah. In the bodybuilding world, I haven't kept up with it. I stopped following bodybuilding kind of after Arnold phased out of it and got into acting and stuff, but he was such an impressive person to look at.
Yeah.
But he seemed like the genetic wonder kid. But Frank Zane seemed to me like the Zen master who...
That's right.
was just the kind of the epitome of balance and focus, and was somebody who bodybuilded not because he had compensations going, but because he was wanting to truly master the human physique.
Right.
And then there was other guys, Franco Colombo and all the big guys, Lou Ferrigno and all those guys, and I didn't study them well enough to know, but I really saw
I agree with you.
that Frank Zane was like the Zen monk and Arnold was like the wonder kid. Not that he didn't have to work for it, because at that level, as you know, everyone's got to work for it. But so I did get to see someone who I think was born to be a bodybuilder. Another guy like that's Bill Pearl.
Yeah.
He was someone who was really, I think, a genuine, authentic expression of what a bodybuilder can be, and is a very spiritual man.
I think the unfortunate reality is, like, the people who may be genetically blessed and chosen for bodybuilding now, unfortunately have to push beyond what their genetics allow. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the unfortunate reality. Like, drugs level the playing field. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe not level it, but allows guys who maybe wouldn't have been at that level to push a little harder with the drugs.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, everybody's at the same playing field. So now you look at these guys like Zane, who obviously still exist. There's many guys who are ridiculously genetically blessed, who can't really show those beautiful genetic physiques because they have to push so much further just to be able to stay on stage with.
Yeah. It's a completely different kind of ball game.
It is.
And it's throughout sports, right?
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize one of the most heavy drug users in sports are elite tennis players.
Really?
Yeah, because they have to play these long, grueling matches, so their drugs aren't designed to make them bigger, because that would slow them down. It's designed to enhance their capacity to recover and to be able to keep the pace up. But there's lots of drugs in tennis, and there's a lot of drugs, as I'm sure you know, in competitive cycling.
Sure.
So there's drugs in places where people don't realize there's drugs, right? So I'm curious, what advice would you offer parents to help them realize the pain and the danger of ineffective parenting and the kinds of painful overcompensation it creates in people and athletes? So if you could say to the parents of the world, hey, look, be careful, because you might do more damage than that kid can ever bodybuild his way out of, or martial arts his way out of.
Yeah, as you and I discussed, like, that's become my biggest passion in life now, right?
Yeah, I think it's important.
I've transcended this desire to continue to build muscle, and now I'm really focusing on, what does it actually mean to be a great dad? What does it mean to create a great dynamic with your children? And I think the easiest thing for people to realize is parenting is not about what you teach your children. Parenting is about yourself and how you can become a better version of yourself to reflect on your children, right? And so many people are reading parenting books, which is ironic to me, because there's so little that you can do. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot you can do ultimately, but the big thing that I realize is kids, they hear nothing of what you say and see 100% of what you do.
Yes.
And when you realize that as a parent, it really shifts. I think it should shift your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certainly a lot of damage that can be done by parents trying to impart their expectations of what this child should be on that child. So if I'm a parent who's very concerned with what everybody thinks, they're concerned about their own image, when people are perceiving them.
Very common in religious families.
Sure.
Especially Christian.
Right. And now it's going to be pushed down on the kids, like, you have to be this way. This is the way you have to be. Kids can't be expressive of themselves anymore.
God's watching.
Right. Yeah.
Carefully.
Right. And now, kids can't express themselves. Parents are always putting them in their place.
Yeah.
If they're doing something wrong, you're not listening to me, you're going to be punished by God. Like, Sarah, you're going to get punished, you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge problem in the development of children and finding themselves. And you and I talked about this on the podcast we just did, on my podcast. Like, how does somebody find themselves? How do they find the meaning in their life? How do they find who they are and what brings them ultimate fulfillment? Well, one I can tell you certainly isn't, is when your parents are constantly smacking you down when you think you're doing something that's going to make you feel better. It's bringing you back down because you're told, don't do that. That's not the way you get love in this world. And literally just beating it out of you, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly getting reprimanded for doing things that are, not acceptable, quote unquote, to your parents or to in your cultural group, and you're just not going to do them anymore, right? The personalities we develop are not necessarily our own. It's the ones that get us love in society.
Yes.
Which is terrible.
It's sad. But as we'll see, it's got a strange, incredibly strange twist to it.
Always.
You know, I've always told my students and my patients, God has the most incredible sense of humor, but you have to be brave enough to hang around for the punchline. Which means sometimes you got to work through shit to get there.
And I talk about that, or sorry, I don't talk about that, but I think about that with my kids. It's like, how much did that, you know, whomever saying you'll never amount to something actually play into my success?
Yes, a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, at what level do you just let it ride? And like, not me to influence them like that, but like, as a parent, you're always trying to shelter them. You're like, I don't want them to be around negative people. I don't want them to be around, you know, I kind of want to curate what they read, what they see, what they watch.
Well, today is important with the digital age and the access to too much information, because that can fry a kid's mind. And you know, the science of brainwashing is well established, and phones and computers are excellent brainwashing tools. So I think there's a certain level of filtration that to protect them. But eventually, you know, that we all come in contact with everything, right? But if you have good habits in place and kids have a good sense of connection to mom and dad, you know, I think one of the most important things for parents to understand is that you should never make it scarier to tell the truth than it is to tell a lie. Yeah. Or your kids can never tell you what's really going on inside of them, because the fear of the pain of being honest is worse than the guilt of lying. Yeah. And so really a lot of kids have to learn to lie to survive their parents, but that sets them up for a way of relating with the world that just leads to all sorts of problems in all levels of relationships.
That's the only rule in my house is if you lie, the punishment's very, very big. And if you tell the truth, I'm usually pretty lenient, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want you to come and tell me. I want you to feel confident to come and tell me something. So my kids are very good now with, no matter what they did, I always say, like, I'm on your team, right? Yeah. Like, my goal is to make you better. My goal is to teach you. If you're lying to me, now you're on a different team, and now I have to come in and oppose you. Now you're in my opposition, right?
Yeah.
So that analogy tends to work with my kids. Like, you're on my team or you're on the other team, you know? If you're going to lie to me, you're on someone else's team, and then I'm going to come at you oppositionally. Whereas if you're on my team, you're telling me the truth, and I'm going to support you to get better, right? That's how teams work.
Yes.
And so that, I mean, may not work for everybody, but that seems to work well for me.
I think it's